Chapter 1. The Invitation. In the quiet, picturesque town of Ravenswood, the residents had long whispered about the ominous mansion perched on the hill, a place that seemed to watch over the town like a brooding sentinel. The mansion, known as Ravenwood Manor, had been abandoned for decades, its windows dark and its gardens overgrown with weeds and thorns. Legends of ghostly apparitions and unexplained disappearances shrouded the manor in mystery and fear. Yet this did not deter the curiosity of Ethan, Claire, Marcus, and Leela. It was a crisp autumn evening when the invitation arrived. Ethan found it on his doorstep, a black envelope with crimson ink spelling out his name. He showed it to Claire, his girlfriend, whose eyes widened with both excitement and trepidation. They called their friends, Marcus and Leela, and arranged to meet at Ethan's house to discuss the strange delivery. By the time everyone arrived, the sun had set, casting long shadows that seemed to creep and crawl across the walls. The invitation itself was elegantly written, anachronistic in its formal tone. It read, "You are cordially invited to an evening at Ravenwood Manor, where secrets of the past come to life. Midnight sharp." There was no signature, no indication of who had sent it, but the allure of the unknown was too strong to resist. Marcus, the group's skeptic, laughed it off as a prank, but even he couldn't deny the curiosity that gnawed at him. Leela, with her love for all things supernatural, was the most enthusiastic. She believed there was more to the invitation than met the eye. Perhaps a chance to uncover the truth behind the haunted legends. As the clock neared midnight, they gathered their courage and prepared to visit the manor. They dressed warmly, anticipating a long and chilly night. Leela packed a few items she thought might be useful: a flashlight, a notebook, and a camera. Marcus brought along a crowbar, just in case. Claire wore a locket that had belonged to her grandmother, a talisman for protection. Ethan, the natural leader of the group, kept the invitation tucked safely in his jacket pocket. The journey to Ravenwood Manor was eerie and silent. The path leading up to the hill was shrouded in mist, and the only sounds were the crunch of leaves beneath their feet and the distant hoot of an owl. As they neared the mansion, they felt an inexplicable chill in the air, as if the very atmosphere was warning them to turn back. But driven by curiosity and a sense of adventure, they pressed on. Ravenwood Manor loomed before them, a dark silhouette against the moonlit sky. The building's Gothic architecture was both beautiful and intimidating, with its towering spires and intricate stonework. The windows, dark and empty, seemed to stare down at them with silent malice. The friends stood at the foot of the grand staircase leading to the front door, each feeling a mix of awe and dread. Ethan was the first to step forward. His heart pounded as he ascended the steps, each one creaking under his weight. The massive oak doors, carved with strange and unsettling patterns, loomed before him. He hesitated for a moment, his hand hovering over the tarnished brass knocker. With a deep breath, he lifted it and knocked 3 times. The sound echoed through the night, sending a shiver down their spines. To their surprise, the door creaked open on its own. Inside, the foyer was dimly lit by a few flickering candles, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The air was heavy with the scent of dust and decay. They stepped inside, their footsteps echoing in the vast, empty space. The door closed behind them with a soft thud, sealing them inside. The interior of the manor was both grand and haunting. Cobwebs draped over the chandeliers, and the once opulent furniture was covered in a thick layer of dust. The wallpaper, faded and peeling, depicted scenes of lavish parties and grand celebrations from a bygone era. It was as if time had stopped within these walls, preserving a ghostly memory of the past. Leela's eyes were drawn to the portraits lining the walls. Each one depicted a member of the Ravenwood family, their expressions solemn, and their eyes seemingly following the group's every move. One portrait in particular caught her attention, a stern-looking man with piercing eyes and a neatly trimmed beard. His gaze was so intense that it sent a shiver down her spine. "Who do you think he is?" Leela asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Probably the patriarch of the family, Ethan replied, equally captivated by the painting. He looks like he was in charge of everything around here. Claire, who had been silent, finally spoke up. This place gives me the creeps. It's like we're being watched. Marcus, trying to lighten the mood, laughed nervously. It's just an old house. Nothing to be afraid of. But even he couldn't shake the feeling of unease that hung in the air. The mansion felt alive, as if it were breathing, watching, waiting. They moved deeper into the house, exploring room after room, each one more dilapidated than the last. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards and the distant drip of water. In the dining room, a long table was set with dusty, untouched china. It was as if a grand feast had been abruptly abandoned. The friends exchanged uneasy glances, the atmosphere growing more sinister with each passing moment. They ventured into the library, its shelves lined with ancient books covered in cobwebs. Leela picked up a leather-bound tome and blew off the dust, revealing a title in Latin. She shivered, placing it back carefully. As they continued their exploration, they found themselves in a grand parlor. The fireplace, though cold and unused, was the centerpiece of the room. Above it hung another portrait, this one of a woman with a sorrowful expression, her eyes filled with sadness and longing. Claire felt a pang of sympathy for her, wondering what tragedies these walls had witnessed. Midnight was fast approaching. The friends decided to gather in the parlor, feeling an unspoken need to stay together. Ethan checked his watch, the hands ticking closer to 12. The atmosphere grew even colder, and an unsettling silence filled the room. They huddled close, their breath visible in the frigid air. As the clock struck midnight, a sudden gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing the few remaining candles. They were plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the faint moonlight filtering through the grimy windows. The temperature dropped even further, and a low, guttural whisper filled the air. It was indistinct, yet each of them heard it clearly, a voice from beyond the grave. Claire gasped, clutching her arm. "Something just touched me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan quickly turned on the flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. But there was nothing there, no sign of anyone or anything that could have touched her. The room was empty, yet the feeling of being watched was stronger than ever. Marcus, trying to maintain his composure, spoke with forced bravado. "It's just our imaginations. Let's keep moving." But the friends knew, deep down, that they had crossed a threshold. Ravenwood Manor was no ordinary abandoned house. It was a place of darkness, a repository of secrets and malevolent forces that had lain dormant for far too long. And now they had awakened something ancient and vague. Chapter 2. Crossing the Threshold. The massive oak doors of Ravenwood Manor loomed before them, their intricate carvings depicting scenes of revelry and despair. Ethan hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. With a deep breath, he pushed the doors open, the creaking sound echoing ominously in the still night air. The friends stepped into the dimly lit foyer, their footsteps echoing through the vast, empty space. The air was thick with the scent of dust and decay, mingling with a faint, metallic tang. Inside, the grand foyer was a haunting sight. A crystal chandelier hung precariously above, its once sparkling crystals now dulled by years of neglect. Cobwebs draped from the ceiling like ghostly curtains, swaying gently in the draft. The marble floor, cracked and stained, reflected the flickering light from the few remaining candles that lined the walls. Each candle burned with an eerie, sputtering flame, casting long, dancing shadows. Leela was the first to speak, her voice hushed and reverent. "It's like stepping back in time," she said, her eyes wide with wonder. She was drawn to the portraits that lined the walls, each one depicting a member of the Ravenwood family. Their faces were stern and somber, their eyes seeming to follow the group as they moved further into the manor. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The portraits, with their lifelike gazes, seemed almost alive. One in particular, of a man with piercing blue eyes and a neatly trimmed beard, sent a shiver down his spine. He felt as if those eyes were boring into his soul, judging him, warning him. "Let's stick together," Ethan suggested, his voice tinged with unease. "This place is huge, and we don't want to get lost." They moved deeper into the manor, their footsteps echoing eerily through the cavernous halls. Each room they entered was more decayed than the last, the once luxurious furnishings now reduced to rotting wood and tattered fabric. The wallpaper, once vibrant and colorful, was now faded and peeling, revealing patches of damp, moldy plaster underneath. The friends explored in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Claire, normally the most composed of the group, found herself jumping at every creak and groan. The oppressive atmosphere of the mansion was getting to her, and she could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She clung to Ethan's arm for reassurance, but even his presence couldn't dispel the growing sense of dread. In the grand parlor, they found a fireplace that had long since gone cold. Above it hung a portrait of a woman with sad, soulful eyes. Her face was pale, her expression one of deep sorrow. Claire felt an inexplicable connection to her, as if the woman's pain resonated with something deep inside her. "Who do you think she was?" Claire asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Probably one of the Ravenwood women," Marcus replied, his tone distracted. He was more interested in the strange, archaic symbols carved into the fireplace mantel. These carvings looked like they could be part of some kind of ritual or spell. Leela, always the one to embrace the supernatural, was fascinated by the symbols. "Maybe they were into some kind of occult practices," she suggested, her eyes gleaming with excitement. It would explain the stories about this place being haunted. Ethan, however, was more focused on their immediate surroundings. He noticed that the room had grown significantly colder, and a thin layer of frost had begun to form on the windows. "We need to be careful," he said, his voice steady but firm. "Something isn't right here." As they continued their exploration, they found themselves in a long, narrow hallway. The walls were lined with even more portraits, each one depicting a different member of the Ravenwood family. The eyes in the paintings seemed to glow with an unnatural light, and the friends could feel the weight of those gazes pressing down on them. Leela stopped in front of a particularly disturbing portrait. It depicted a young girl, no more than 10 years old, with hollow eyes and a twisted smile. The background was filled with dark, swirling shadows, giving the impression that the girl was emerging from the depths of a nightmare. Leela felt a chill run down her spine as she stared at the painting, unable to tear her eyes away. "What's wrong?" Ethan asked, noticing Leela's discomfort. "There's something about this portrait," Leela replied, her voice trembling. "It's like she's trying to tell us something." Claire moved closer to inspect the painting, her curiosity piqued. As she did, she felt a sudden rush of cold air, as if something had brushed past her. She gasped and stepped back, her hand flying to her mouth. "Did you feel that?" she asked, her eyes wide with fear. Marcus, who had been silent for most of the exploration, finally spoke up. "We need to keep moving," he said, his voice tight with tension. "Standing around isn't going to help us figure out what's going on here." They pressed on, the sense of unease growing with each step. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, and the flickering candlelight did little to dispel the darkness that encroached upon them. As they walked, they could hear the faint sound of whispering, indistinct and distant, but growing louder with each passing moment. At the end of the hallway, they found a set of double doors, their wood dark and foreboding. Ethan pushed them open, revealing a grand staircase that spiraled upwards into the darkness. The banister was ornately carved, and the steps were covered in a thick layer of dust. The air was thick with the scent of decay and something else, something metallic and sharp. "We need to go up," Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "If we're going to find any answers, it's going to be up there." They began their ascent, each step echoing through the silent manor. The stairs creaked and groaned under their weight, and the darkness seemed to press in on them from all sides. As they climbed, the whispering grew louder, until it was almost deafening. It was a cacophony of voices, each one speaking in a language they couldn't understand. Leela clung to Ethan's arm, her fear palpable. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the noise. "Yes," Ethan replied, his jaw set. "Just keep moving. We're almost there." When they reached the top of the staircase, they found themselves in another long hallway. This one was lined with doors, each one slightly ajar. The whispering was louder here, and the air was thick with an oppressive, suffocating presence. They moved cautiously, their nerves frayed and their senses on high alert. Ethan pushed open the first door on the left, revealing a small, dusty room. It was empty, save for a single chair in the center. The walls were covered in strange, archaic symbols, similar to those they had seen in the parlor. He felt a chill run down his spine as he stepped inside, the air growing colder with each passing second. "There's something written here," Claire said, pointing to a spot on the wall. The symbols were carved deep into the plaster, their lines sharp and precise. "Do you think it's some kind of warning?" Leela took a step closer, her eyes scanning the symbols. "It looks like it could be a protective spell," she suggested. "Maybe whoever lived here was trying to keep something out." Marcus, ever the skeptic, shook his head. "Or they were trying to keep something in." The tension in the room was palpable as they continued their exploration. Each room they entered was more unsettling than the last, filled with strange symbols and eerie, unnatural cold. The whispering followed them wherever they went, growing louder and more insistent. In one room, they found an old, dust-covered mirror. As Leela wiped away the grime, they saw their reflections staring back at them, distorted and twisted. The mirror seemed to ripple and shift, as if it were a portal to another world. Leela gasped and stepped back, her heart pounding in her chest. "What is that?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Leela replied, her eyes wide with fear. "But I think we should stay away from it." They moved on, their nerves frayed and their fear growing with each passing moment. The manor seemed to be alive, watching their every move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They could feel its malevolent presence pressing down on them, suffocating and relentless. In the final room they explored, they found a large, ornate chest. It was covered in dust and cobwebs, but the craftsmanship was exquisite. Ethan hesitated for a moment before lifting the lid, revealing a collection of old, leather-bound books. The air grew colder as he picked one up, its cover etched with strange, arcane symbols. "These must be spell books," Leela said, her voice trembling with excitement and fear. "Maybe they'll help us understand what's going on here." But as they examined the books, the whispering grew louder, more insistent. The walls seemed to close in on them, the darkness pressing in from all sides. They felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as if they were being watched by unseen eyes. "We need to get out of here," Claire said, her voice filled with panic. "Something is very wrong with this place." Ethan nodded, his jaw set with determination. "Let's go. We've seen enough." They made their way back down the grand staircase, the whispering following them every step of the... Chapter 3. The First Sign. The friends regrouped in the grand parlor, the oppressive atmosphere weighing heavily on their shoulders. The room was bathed in an eerie half-light, the flickering candles casting dancing shadows on the walls. Claire wrapped her arms around herself, trying to ward off the pervasive chill that seemed to seep into her bones. "I don't like this," she muttered, glancing nervously around the room. Ethan, ever the leader, tried to maintain a semblance of calm. "We just need to stay focused," he said, though his own unease was evident in his tense posture. "Let's go over what we've found so far. Maybe there's something we've missed." "Leela," still fascinated by the spellbooks they had discovered, was flipping through one of the ancient tomes. "These books might hold the key to understanding what's happening here," she said, her voice a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Look at this one. It's filled with protective charms and rituals." Marcus, who had been pacing the room, finally stopped and turned to face the group. "We need to find a way out of here," he said, his voice laced with frustration. "This place is dangerous. We can figure out the mysteries later, once we're safe." Before they could decide on their next move, the temperature in the room plummeted. The fire in the hearth, which had been providing some small measure of warmth, suddenly went out as if extinguished by an unseen hand. The room was plunged into near darkness, the only light coming from the flickering candles. A low, guttural whisper filled the air, sending a shiver down their spines. The sound was indistinguishable yet undeniably threatening. It seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Claire clutched her arm, her eyes wide with fear. "Something just touched me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan quickly shone his flashlight around the room, its beam cutting through the darkness. But there was nothing there, no sign of anyone or anything that could have touched Claire. The room was empty, yet the feeling of being watched was stronger than ever. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, filling the room with an unsettling cacophony. "We need to get out of here," Marcus repeated, his voice urgent. "This place is alive. It's trying to mess with our heads." Leela, still clutching the spellbook, nodded reluctantly. "Maybe Marcus is right. We should leave while we still can." As they turned to leave the parlor, the whispering suddenly stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. The friends exchanged uneasy glances, the hairs on the back of their necks standing on end. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. They made their way back to the grand foyer, their footsteps echoing ominously through the vast space. The front door, which had opened so easily upon their arrival, was now firmly shut. Ethan tried to push it open, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if an invisible force was holding it closed. "Help me with this," Ethan said, gesturing to Marcus. Together, they pushed against the heavy oak doors, but they remained stubbornly shut. "It's no use," Marcus said, panting from the effort. "We're trapped." Leela glanced around, her eyes wide with fear. "There must be another way out," she said, her voice shaky. "Maybe a back door or a window we can break." The friends began to search the mansion in earnest, checking every door and window they came across. But each one was either locked or unbreakable, the glass seeming to absorb the force of their blows. It was as if the house had sealed itself shut, trapping them inside. In their desperation, they found themselves back in the library, the hidden door behind the bookshelf still ajar. The narrow, spiral staircase descending into darkness seemed to beckon them, promising a way out, or perhaps something far worse. Ethan hesitated at the top of the stairs, the flashlight casting long shadows on the walls. "We don't have much choice," he said, his voice steady but filled with determination. "We need to see what's down there. It might be our only way out." The friends descended the staircase, the air growing colder and mustier with each step. The narrow steps creaked under their weight, the sound echoing eerily through the darkness. As they reached the bottom, they found themselves in a small, dimly lit room. The walls were lined with shelves filled with old, dusty furniture covered in white sheets. In the center of the room stood a large wooden table, its surface covered with strange, archaic symbols. An ornate box sat atop the table, its lid slightly ajar. Claire approached the box, her curiosity getting the better of her. She lifted the lid and peered inside, her eyes widening in shock. Inside the box were old photographs, each one depicting scenes of dark rituals and gatherings, all centered around a sinister-looking altar. The people in the photographs were dressed in long, hooded robes, their faces obscured by shadows. It was clear that the Ravenwood family had been involved in something deeply sinister. Leela shuddered as she looked at the photographs, her mind racing with possibilities. "These must be the rituals that the spellbooks mentioned," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They were performing dark magic here." Ethan, still focused on finding a way out, scanned the room for any other exits. His flashlight revealed a small door at the far end of the room, almost hidden by the shadows. He approached it cautiously, pushing it open with a creak. Beyond the door was a narrow passageway, its walls lined with more strange symbols. The air was thick with a scent of damp earth and decay. "This way," Ethan said, gesturing for the others to follow. "Maybe this will lead us outside." They moved through the passageway, the walls seeming to close in on them as they went deeper into the darkness. The whispering had returned, louder and more insistent than before. It was as if the voices were all around them, urging them to turn back. But there was no turning back now. They had to keep moving forward, no matter what awaited them at the end of the passageway. As they reached the end, they found themselves in a small, circular room. The walls were covered in even more of the strange symbols, their lines glowing faintly in the darkness. In the center of the room stood a stone altar, its surface stained with dark, dried blood. The sight of it filled them with a deep sense of dread. It was clear that this was the heart of the mansion's dark magic, the place where the rituals had been performed. Leela stepped forward, her eyes wide with fear and fascination. "This is it," she said, her voice trembling. "This is where it all happened." Claire, feeling a sense of overwhelming despair, sank to her knees. "We need to get out of here," she said, her voice barely audible. "This place is evil." Ethan nodded, his jaw set with determination. "We need to destroy this altar," he said. "Maybe that will break whatever curse is keeping us here." Marcus, always the pragmatist, picked up a heavy stone from the floor. "Stand back," he said, raising the stone above his head. With a powerful swing, he brought it crashing down onto the altar. The stone shattered on impact, sending shards flying in all directions. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the room began to shake violently, the walls cracking and crumbling around them. The whispering grew to a deafening roar, filling their minds with a cacophony of voices. The friends clung to each other, their fear palpable. As the shaking subsided, they looked around, their hearts pounding. The altar was destroyed, its pieces scattered across the floor. The symbols on the walls had faded, their glow extinguished. The air was still thick with tension, but the oppressive presence had lifted. "We did it," Ethan said, his voice filled with relief. "We broke the curse." But as they made their way back through the passageway, they realized that their ordeal was far from over. The mansion still held many secrets, and the spirits of the past were not so easily vanquished. They would need to uncover the full truth of Ravenwood Manor if they were ever to escape its clutches. The friends emerged from the passageway, their resolve strengthened, but their fears still present. The mansion was a labyrinth of darkness and danger, and they would need all their wits and courage to survive. As they regrouped in the grand parlor, they knew that their journey was just beginning. Chapter 4: Echoes from the Past. The friends huddled together in the grand parlor, the destruction of the altar still fresh in their minds. The air was heavy with anticipation, the silence almost palpable. Ethan, ever the leader, spoke first. "We need to keep moving. There are still too many unanswered questions." Leela nodded, her eyes reflecting a mix of fear and determination. "We have to find out what happened here. The truth is our only way out." Marcus, who had been silent since the altar incident, finally spoke up. "We need to be careful. Whatever happened here, it's still dangerous. We can't afford any mistakes." Claire, still visibly shaken, added, "Maybe we should look for more clues in the other rooms. There might be something that can help us." With a shared sense of purpose, they decided to split up, hoping to cover more ground. Ethan and Claire headed towards the west wing, while Leela and Marcus took the east. The mansion's labyrinthine corridors seemed to stretch endlessly, each corner shrouded in darkness. As Ethan and Claire moved through the dusty halls, the air grew colder. The flickering light from their flashlights cast long, eerie shadows. They entered a room that appeared to be a study, its walls lined with bookshelves. The books were ancient, their pages yellowed with age. Claire picked up a book and opened it, her eyes scanning the faded text. "These look like journals," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe they can tell us more about the Ravenwood family." Ethan nodded, flipping through another book. "Look for anything that mentions the rituals or the curse." Meanwhile, in the East Wing, Leela and Marcus were exploring what seemed to be a nursery. The room was filled with old, broken toys and a small, dilapidated crib. The wallpaper, once bright and cheerful, was now faded and peeling. Leela felt a chill run down her spine as she picked up a dusty doll from the floor. Its eyes were missing, and its dress was tattered. "This place is so sad," she said, her voice tinged with sorrow. "I can't imagine what the children must have gone through." Marcus, ever the skeptic, was examining a small desk in the corner. He found a stack of old letters, their ink faded but still legible. "These might be useful," he said, handing one to Leela. "They could have written something about the rituals." Back in the study, Ethan and Claire were engrossed in the journals. Claire found an entry that seemed particularly relevant. "Listen to this," she said, reading aloud. "The rituals are our only hope. The spirits demand sacrifice, and we must obey to keep them at bay." Ethan frowned, his brow furrowed. It sounds like they were trying to appease something. But what? Claire shook her head, her expression grim. Whatever it was, it must have been powerful. They were willing to do anything to keep it from harming them. In the nursery, Leela and Marcus were making their own discoveries. Leela found a letter that made her blood run cold. "Marcus, look at this," she said, handing him the letter. "We had no choice. The spirits took our children. We must continue the rituals, or they will take us too." Marcus felt a chill settle over him as he read the letter. This explains the photographs and the altar. They were desperate, willing to do anything to save themselves. The friends regrouped in the grand parlor, their findings weighing heavily on their minds. The journals and letters painted a picture of a family driven to madness by their fear of the spirits. They had performed dark rituals, sacrificing their own children in a futile attempt to save themselves. Ethan paced the room, his mind racing. "We need to find the source of this curse. If we can destroy it, we might be able to break free." Leela nodded, her expression resolute. The journals mentioned a hidden chamber beneath the mansion. "It's where they performed the most powerful rituals. We need to find it." Marcus, ever pragmatic, added, "But how? This place is a maze. We could search for days and not find anything." Claire, who had been deep in thought, suddenly spoke up. "The symbols. The ones we saw on the walls. They might be a map, guiding us to the chamber." With renewed determination, they began their search for the hidden chamber. They retraced their steps, examining the symbols more closely. Each one seemed to point in a specific direction, leading them deeper into the mansion's bowels. As they followed the symbols, the air grew colder, and the whispering returned, louder and more insistent. It was as if the spirits were trying to warn them, or perhaps lure them into a trap. The friends pressed on, their fear outweighed by their determination to uncover the truth. They eventually found themselves in a dark, narrow hallway. The symbols were more prominent here, their lines glowing faintly in the darkness. At the end of the hallway was a heavy, iron door, its surface covered in more of the strange markings. Ethan took a deep breath and pushed the door open. It creaked ominously, revealing a staircase that descended into darkness. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. "This must be it," he said, his voice filled with resolve. The friends descended the staircase, their flashlights barely penetrating the darkness. The walls were lined with more symbols, their glow growing stronger as they went deeper. The whispering was almost deafening now, a cacophony of voices that seemed to come from everywhere at once. At the bottom of the stairs, they found themselves in a large, circular chamber. The walls were covered in strange, glowing symbols, and in the center of the room stood another stone altar. This one was larger and more ornate, its surface stained with dark, dried blood. Leela stepped forward, her eyes wide with fear and fascination. "This is it," she said, her voice trembling. "This is where they performed the rituals." Claire, her resolve hardened, said, "We need to destroy it. If we break the altar, we might be able to break the curse." Marcus, ever the pragmatist, picked up a heavy stone from the floor. "Stand back," he said, raising the stone above his head. With a powerful swing, he brought it crashing down onto the altar. The stone shattered on impact, sending shards flying in all directions. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the room began to shake violently, the walls cracking and crumbling around them. The whispering grew to a deafening roar, filling their minds with a cacophony of voices. The friends clung to each other, their fear palpable. As the shaking subsided, they looked around, their hearts pounding. The altar was destroyed, its pieces scattered across the floor. The symbols on the walls had faded, their glow extinguished. The air was still thick with tension, but the oppressive presence had lifted. "We did it," Ethan said, his voice filled with relief. "We broke the curse." But as they made their way back through the passageway, they realized that their ordeal was far from over. The mansion still held many secrets, and the spirits of the past were not so easily vanquished. They would need to uncover the full truth of Ravenwood Manor if they were ever to escape its clutches. The friends emerged from the passageway, their resolve strengthened, but their fear still present. The mansion was a labyrinth of darkness and danger, and they would need all their wits and courage to survive. As they regrouped in the grand parlor, they knew that their journey was just beginning. Chapter 5. Unseen Forces. The friends gathered in the grand parlor once more, their nerves frayed and their minds reeling from their recent discoveries. Ethan, his brow furrowed in thought, broke the uneasy silence. "We've destroyed the altars, but something tells me this isn't over yet." Leela nodded, her expression grave. "The spirits are still here. We need to find a way to appease them." Claire shivered, the memory of the whispers still fresh in her mind. "But how? We don't even know what they want." Marcus, ever the skeptic, scoffed. "Maybe they want us to join them in death. Or maybe they just enjoy tormenting the living." Ethan shot him a withering glare. "That's not helpful, Marcus. We need to focus on finding a solution, not dwelling on worst-case scenarios." With a collective sigh, they set about brainstorming ideas. They pored over the journals and letters they had found, searching for any clue that might shed light on the spirit's desires. After hours of fruitless searching, Ethan finally spoke up. "There's something we're missing. Something right in front of us that we haven't seen." Leela frowned, her mind racing. "The symbols," she said suddenly. "We've been seeing them everywhere. Maybe they hold the key." Claire's eyes widened in realization. What if the symbols are a form of communication? Maybe the spirits are trying to tell us something. Ethan nodded, his excitement growing. "It's worth a shot. Let's see if we can decipher the symbols and figure out what they're trying to tell us." They gathered around the symbols in the grand parlor, studying them intently. Each line and curve seemed to pulse with energy, as if imbued with a hidden meaning. With a shared sense of purpose, they began to decipher the symbols, comparing them to the ones they had seen throughout the mansion. Slowly, but surely, a pattern began to emerge. The symbols seemed to form a message, a plea from the spirits trapped within the walls of Ravenwood Manor. It spoke of regret and sorrow, of souls lost and lives destroyed. But it also spoke of redemption, of a chance to set things right. Ethan's heart raced as he read the message aloud. "The spirits are asking for forgiveness," he said, his voice filled with awe. "They want us to help them find peace." Leela's eyes brimmed with tears as she listened. "We have to help them," she said, her voice trembling. "It's the least we can do after everything they've been through." With newfound determination, the friends set out to fulfill the spirit's request. They searched every inch of the mansion, following the symbols and piecing together the fragments of the past. They uncovered hidden chambers and secret passages, each one revealing more of the tragic history of Ravenwood Manor. As they worked, they could feel the atmosphere in the mansion shifting. The air grew lighter, and the whispers faded into a gentle hum. It was as if the spirits were guiding them, leading them towards the truth. Finally, they found themselves in the grand foyer once more, the symbols glowing faintly on the walls around them. Ethan took a deep breath and addressed the spirits directly. "We hear your plea," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We will do everything in our power to help you find peace." At his words, a soft light filled the room, illuminating the symbols and casting a warm, comforting glow. The air seemed to shimmer with energy, and the friends felt a sense of peace wash over them. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble, and a blinding light filled the room. When it faded, they found themselves standing in a beautiful garden bathed in sunlight. The mansion was nowhere to be seen, replaced by rolling hills and colorful flowers as far as the eye could see. They knew then that they had succeeded. The spirits had found their peace, and Ravenwood Manor was no more. As they stood together in the garden, basking in the warmth of the sun, they knew that they would never forget their journey or the unseen forces that had guided them to salvation. Chapter 6. The Haunting Truth. The friends stood in the garden, the warmth of the sun washing over them as they basked in the sense of accomplishment and relief. Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder at their surroundings, the garden stretching out before them in all its beauty. Leela sighed contentedly, her eyes sparkling with tears of joy. "We did it," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "We helped the spirits find peace." Claire nodded, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. "It's like a dream," she said, her voice soft with awe. "I never thought we'd actually succeed." Marcus, ever the skeptic, remained silent, his gaze fixed on the horizon. His mind was still reeling from their ordeal, trying to make sense of everything they had experienced. As they stood together, a voice echoed through the garden, soft and ethereal. "Thank you," it said, its tone filled with gratitude. "You have given us the peace we have longed for." The friends exchanged surprised glances, their hearts pounding in their chests. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. Was it possible that the spirits were speaking to them directly? Ethan took a step forward, his eyes scanning the garden for any sign of movement. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The voice laughed softly, the sound like music to their ears. "We are the spirits of Ravenwood Manor," it said, its tone gentle yet filled with sorrow. "We have been trapped here for centuries, unable to move on." Leela gasped, her eyes widening in realization. "You mean, you're the ones we helped?" The voice nodded, though they couldn't see who or what was speaking. "Yes," it said. "Thanks to you, we are finally free." Claire felt a surge of emotion welling up inside her. "But why were you trapped here?" she asked, her voice trembling with curiosity. The voice grew somber, its tone heavy with regret. "We were cursed," it said. "Cursed by our own greed and folly. We sought power beyond our understanding, and it cost us everything." Marcus frowned, his mind racing with questions. "Who cursed you? And why?" The voice hesitated for a moment before responding. It was our own doing, it said, its tone tinged with sadness. We delved too deep into the darkness, and it consumed us. The curse was our punishment for our hubris. Ethan felt a pang of sympathy for the spirits, their plight echoing his own struggles. "Is there anything we can do to help you further?" he asked, his voice filled with compassion. The voice grew quiet, as if considering his offer. "There is one thing," it said finally. "We wish for our story to be told. We want the world to know of our mistakes, so that others may learn from them." The friends exchanged glances, their hearts heavy with the weight of the spirit's request. But they knew that it was the least they could do after everything they had been through. "We will tell your story," Ethan said, his voice firm with resolve. "We will make sure that the world knows of your suffering and your redemption." The voice seemed to sigh in relief, its presence fading from the garden. "Thank you," it said, its words echoing in their minds. "Thank you for everything." As the sun began to set on the horizon, bathing the garden in golden light, the friends knew that their journey was far from over. They had freed the spirits of Ravenwood Manor, but their story was just beginning. And as they stood together in the fading light, they knew that they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, guided by the haunting truth of their experiences. Chapter 7. The Final Revelation. The friends returned to their lives outside of Ravenwood Manor, but they couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was far from over, the haunting memories of their ordeal lingering in their minds like a persistent shadow. Ethan, ever the leader, couldn't stop thinking about the spirits they had encountered, their voices echoing in his dreams. Leela threw herself into her research, determined to uncover the truth behind the curse that had plagued the mansion for centuries. Claire found solace in her artwork, channeling her emotions into her paintings as she tried to make sense of everything they had experienced. Marcus, ever the skeptic, tried to put the whole ordeal behind him, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to uncover. Months passed, and the friends drifted apart, their lives taking them in different directions. But their bond remained strong, forged in the crucible of Ravenwood Manor. Then, one day, Ethan received a letter in the mail, a letter from a stranger claiming to have information about the mansion's dark past. Intrigued, he arranged to meet the stranger, hoping to finally uncover the truth. As Ethan sat across from the stranger in a dimly lit cafe, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over him. The stranger's eyes were dark and intense, and there was a nervous energy about him that set Ethan on edge. "I have information about Ravenwood Manor," the stranger said, his voice low and urgent. Information that could change everything. Ethan leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "What do you know?" he asked, his heart pounding in his chest. The stranger glanced around nervously before speaking. "The curse of Ravenwood Manor was no accident," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "It was a deliberate act of revenge." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "Revenge? Against who?" The stranger leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Against the Ravenwood family," he said. "They were not the innocent victims they claimed to be. They were responsible for unspeakable atrocities, and the curse was their punishment." Ethan's mind raced with questions. But why would they curse themselves? It doesn't make sense. The stranger shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "They didn't curse themselves," he said. "They were cursed by someone else, someone who had suffered at their hands and sought vengeance." Ethan felt a sense of dread settling over him. "Who?" he asked, his voice barely audible. The stranger leaned back in his chair, his eyes filled with sadness. "Me," he said simply. Ethan's blood ran cold as he realized the truth. The stranger was one of the spirits of Ravenwood Manor, the one who had orchestrated their journey from the very beginning. He had guided them to the truth, manipulating events from beyond the grave in his quest for justice. As Ethan stared at the stranger in disbelief, he knew that their journey was far from over. The final revelation had only just begun, and the friends would need to confront the darkest secrets of Ravenwood Manor if they ever hoped to find peace. Chapter 8. The Final Confrontation. Ethan returned from his meeting with a stranger, his mind swirling with a whirlwind of emotions and thoughts. The revelation of the stranger's identity weighing heavily on him like a leaden cloak. He knew he had to share what he had learned with his friends, to confront the truth together, no matter how difficult it might be. Leela, still immersed in her research, greeted him with a mix of concern and curiosity as he entered her apartment. "What's wrong?" she asked, her eyes searching his face for answers. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "I met with someone today," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Someone who claims to know the truth about Ravenwood Manor." Leela's eyes widened in surprise. "What did they say?" she asked, her voice tinged with excitement. Ethan hesitated for a moment before revealing the stranger's identity. "It was one of the spirits," he said, his words hanging heavy in the air between them. "He claims that the curse was a deliberate act of revenge against the Ravenwood family." Leela gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. "But why?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. Ethan shook his head, his mind still reeling from the stranger's revelation. "He didn't say," he admitted. "But he wants to meet with all of us, to confront the truth together." Leela nodded, her resolve firm. "Then we should go," she said, her voice filled with determination. "We owe it to ourselves and to the spirits to uncover the full truth." With a shared sense of purpose, they set out to gather their friends. Claire was the first to join them, her eyes wide with anticipation as Ethan shared what he had learned. "We have to go," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "We can't let this opportunity slip away." Marcus, ever the skeptic, was more hesitant. "Are you sure we can trust this stranger?" he asked, his brow furrowed in suspicion. Ethan shrugged, his own doubts still lingering. "I don't know," he admitted, "but we have to try. We owe it to ourselves and to the spirits to confront the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be." With Marcus reluctantly on board, they set out to meet with the stranger once more, their hearts heavy with the weight of what they might uncover. As they arrived at the designated meeting spot, a secluded clearing deep in the woods, they found the stranger waiting for them, his dark eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and determination. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice soft but filled with urgency. "I know this must be difficult for you, but there are things you need to know." Ethan nodded, his jaw set with determination. "Tell us," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Tell us everything." The stranger took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "The curse of Ravenwood Manor was not just a curse," he began, his voice trembling with emotion. "It was a manifestation of the pain and suffering endured by those who had been wronged by the Ravenwood family." As he spoke, the truth began to unfold before them, a tapestry of betrayal and revenge woven from the darkest depths of human nature. The Ravenwood family had been responsible for unspeakable atrocities, their greed and cruelty knowing no bounds. But there were those who had suffered at their hands, who had been driven to the brink of madness by their actions. And it was one of those tormented souls who had sought vengeance, cursing the family to an eternity of torment and despair. As the truth washed over them, the friends felt a sense of closure wash over them, the weight of their burden finally lifted. They had uncovered the darkest secrets of Ravenwood Manor, and in doing so, they had set the spirits free. As they stood together in the clearing, surrounded by the gentle rustle of the wind and the soft glow of the moon, they knew that their journey was finally at an end. And as they turned to leave the clearing behind, they knew that they would carry the haunting memories of their experiences with them always, a reminder of the power of redemption and the strength of friendship.